So working on our Phantom 3 engine rebuilding project, where I like to continue on from this point after we have the engine mounted onto the stand and ready to come apart, I like to first take the intake manifold off. So just give you a little view of how it's constructed. Removing the intake manifold opens up the V so we can get a lot of these tubing out, as well as the ignition conduit wires, and just opens things up that lead into there that need to be removed. And so you can see how it's constructed of 4 different separate arms, and we have nuts and bolts coming in from all sorts of different angles, so we can see. So, and it's pretty busy inside the V of the engine. This fella. So now we hold it that way and undo. So we get our little pipes off, and what these do is they allow coolant to circulate in between this section, usually referred to as a hot spot. So you have your intake fuel, your air and your gas mixture going down through this chamber, and then the outer part of the chamber, which is separate, has coolant going through that. And so what that does is that just helps to even out the temperature of the gases as they go into the intake manifold. If the temperatures aren't regulated, you could have the carburetor could actually develop ice on it and freeze. Earlier cars had exhaust that would go through a similar section, and what they were doing was they were heating the fuel air mixture before it went into the combustion chamber, sort of a preheating chamber. By the Phantom 3, we had increase in compression ratio, and we had better fuels, a little bit better fuels. So heating that wasn't quite as important, but they still wanted to keep that temperature evened out as much as possible. So now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to move on to just getting a couple of these little items out of the way. We'll flip that. What I like to do with linkage assemblies is to take them off as in biggest sections as possible instead of taking them all in little bits. And I normally like to keep parts when they initially come off in these metal colander type baskets so that they can be washed quickly to get the oil residue and stuff off before they get sorted into bags and bins and such. This was, of course, somebody's made up fuel line, not an original. And go get that out of the way. Okay, so now you have some of these pipes that are connecting in at the bottom of the center section of the intake manifold. See if we can get a view of them here. Actually, maybe what I'll do is I'll take the off. So we can see the pipes connecting down bottom there. just give a little view there so people can get a better idea what they're faced with. And as you will see, these are has typical Rolls-Royce fashion. These are special bolts. They're of course British standard, but the intake manifolds are distinctly different from nearly every other bolt that's on the car. So they're special. And we got a lot of them to undo. They're a quarter BSF. Usually not terribly difficult to remove, but I suppose that there may be some that have corrosion issues. That might be a different story. So, in the ones that are a little bit even more difficult to get out, I like the right angle wrench for them. And for them, you really have no other option but to wrench them out. Using a socket isn't gonna really get you anywhere. And just to give a little background on the intake manifold design of the Phantom 3, initially the engine was designed to use 3 SU, or 3 or 4 maybe, SU carburetors that nestled down nicely into the V of the engine. The company, just prior to production, decided that that was just not going to be a good option for manufacturing. It was going to make it very difficult for manufacturing and also very difficult for servicing. If there was carburetor fuel issues, you had to do an awful lot of work. And also to change the inner bank of spark plugs, a lot of that assembly had to come off. So they redevised to the setup that we see now, and they used a carburetor made by Zenith under license from Stromberg. So it's a Stromberg Zenith dual throat downdraft carburetor with an accelerator pump, and it's really quite a good carburetor. I would imagine that they probably did some sort of performance testing or dynamometer testing to compare carburation performance values, and probably found that they were very much the same. I've only seen pictures, drawn pictures. I haven't seen any actual photographs. I don't know if any exist of the SU carburetor setup. And looking at it in the drawings, it looks like it was really a neat design. It really neatened up the appearance since the carburetors were down in very nicely, and then you had a big air cleaner sitting on top. and it would probably have provided a little lower appearance. The engine wouldn't seem to sit up quite as high. Maybe you could have put a lower bonnet on, but that was really regulated from the height of the radiator and the firewall. And of course, when you have multiple carburetors like that, they have to be synchronized. You don't want one carburetor doing all the work and leaning out banks on certain cylinders and richening certain other ones. So the tuning and the adjustment and the maintenance of them was probably just more than what they felt anybody should be able to handle. So, and there's what one of the special bolts looks like. It's got a little bit of a taller head, and again, you put it in there for rinse. We'll continue working this one out. Working on an engine with an engine on an engine stand like this is not too terribly bad. There are times you have to take the intake manifold off with the engine in the car, and that can be a little bit more of a backbreaker, but it can be done. I also have done, on rare instances, taken one cylinder head off. So that's another thing that can be done with this design. If you ever had a reason to do that, perhaps a head gasket failure or an issue with a valve, again, you can just take one cylinder head off. And we'll just make sure. You will notice on this engine that there's a lot of polished aluminum, and a lot of these metal steel fasteners have been chrome plated. It was special ordered that way from new. The first owner, or the original owner, spent 68 pounds extra for that feature. I've never known that to be a feature on any other Phantom 3 engine. This may be the only one. But I'm sure when new, and it will look like that again, it was quite a stunning feature. A smaller 1/4-inch drive, or a little thinner wall. Sometimes you can get those a little closer. And of course, these are different length bolts. I don't usually bother to mark them because it's hard to have any marking that's going to stay on there, but as you go back together, it'll be obvious what length goes where. These brackets are extra supports for the air cleaner. Normally found on ABC series cars. D series cars, they omitted that bracket and it's not on there. And I should also state that this is an ABC series engine, specifically an A series, AZ. When they went to D series, they changed the intake manifold changed a little in design. I don't think the intake manifolding will interchange from D series to ABC series, but the primary change was in the water rail. They simplified that much so, and in doing that, they also made a big change in the cylinder head design. So I got all the nuts and bolts out. It's still stuck on there, so I might need a little encouragement. There it goes. So one arm off. Okay. Can't quite get there. That's going to be a right angle wrench. It's nice when you break them loose and then you can take them out with your fingers, but of course the ones that are difficult to get to aren't doing that for me. Get these guys out of the way. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. I should also add that this is a snap-on 7/16 American size wrench that has been just a little bit ground out to fit the British standard hex of a 1/4 inch bolt. Very well. I don't know if there are any British standard fine wrenches that are right angle. I'm sure that they probably were at some point in time, but I'm sure that they're very difficult to get. Also, when it comes to ratchets, I prefer one that has a swiveling head over a fixed head most of the time. Got a little tight again. One of the other ones. You know, you can position it in all sorts of different ways to make life a lot easier. Another reason one would have to take the intake manifolding off is to replace the inner bank of spark plug wires. I have heard of people doing it with the intake manifold in place, but I think it would take just as long to do it that way as it would just to take the intake manifold off and bite the bullet. If you are to replace all of the ignition wires on a Phantom 3, you're going to need about a 100-foot roll of wire, and you're going to use nearly all of it, if not all of it, by the time you're done. And you have to remember you have 24 spark plugs. The other thing I will note is that, at least I know for sure on the ABC series, that these arms, these intake arm sections, all are specific to where they belong. they don't swap around to different ones. So again, there's no real need to mark those. Off that goes. And you can see how it really opens things up. So now we can undo those plumbing fittings. Opening this up when the engine is out really opens things up. But if the engine is in the car still, then it's probably easiest to remove the front sections. But that doesn't give you quite the same amount of open space that you have, because you still have your distributors in place and some of the other things coming in the way. So that's why I like to handle an engine that's out from the back in that area. Now to remove the center connection, there's a special bolt there. The hex is an undersize and probably I think it's 1BA hex, but the bolt itself is 1/4 inch. But I find that a 10mm fits and works the best. And again, it's a special bolt. You have one on either side. It's a little flange. In this case, I probably could have removed the center section with this still attached, since at one time this line had been cut. But we'll do it this way just to show people how it is. And this is again a water connection, so the hot water will be pumped into, actually it's going to be coming directly from the water pump, so it'd be cool water, I suppose, and it'd be pumping right in through this section and then into the water rails to go back into the radiator. So again, this is what the special bolt looks like. And as you can see, the hex is just a little undersized. I guess they were being generous to give you a little extra room. We'll see what it's like getting this fellow out of the way. Might want to just pop his fuel line off first. Let's see. This one I might be able to get a socket on. And I need to have the ratchet going the right way. Ah. And the other one. Okay, now we get the, see if I remember which size the other ones are. So now the other ones are gasoline overflow connections. So there's a fitting that these flange nuts screw onto, and that fitting has an aluminum ball in it. So the idea is that when the engine's running, the vacuum sucks the ball up and seals that tube off. But when the engine's not running, if your carburetor is flooding or if there's excess fuel inside the intake manifolding, then it'll drain out, and then the drain goes right onto the ground. And again, you want to make sure with these unions that they're not turning and damaging this line. Would not be a fun line to have to remake. I can tell with a lot of these fittings that they had old gas that had dried up in them, and the varnish residue sort of makes it feel like you're undoing a fitting that has molasses in it or something. You want to be as careful as you can with these lines, because if you damage them, as I said before, and have to remake them, it can be quite a job bending tubing to the exact sharp bends that they were able to achieve back in the day. Back at the time, I guess they had special jigs and fixtures for doing it. There we go. There's that one. Okay, so now the 3 connections have been undone at the bottom of the intake manifold center section. I think I'm just going to go a little further. I can feel that that one is pretty stuck. So maybe what I'll do, since this line has been cut, is to remove the fuel filter in case that wants to come out with it. As you can see, where this line's been cut, it's held down by the fuel filter fitting. So I'll start by taking this guy off, which again could have been done a step or two earlier, maybe to give me a little bit more room. So I got some gas dripping. And then we can take this fellow off. The secret fuel filter that a lot of people miss, don't realize needs to be serviced. Smell the gas permeating around. Okay. gas on the hand there. Not exactly what I wanted. Still got to get a nut. Went down in there. We're going to retrieve it. And I might just go ahead and remove this linkage section. In this case, this whole engine's coming apart for rebuilding, so. And you're not going to get that out any other way. Whoops. Well, I guess that came off easily enough. The reason why this was cut on this particular car is because somebody had installed air conditioning on it, and they used that line for an air conditioning. Size are these? So I'll get this guy off. Put these guys in with fuel filter. Oh, got a lot of little hardware pieces to pick up. Set that aside. Okay. So now with that out of the way, we should be able to work this fella out. And now it comes. Okay. There's a connection here, so you can take it apart in two pieces. But I tend to leave that connected because there's always a possibility you'll twist up the line. Alright, so we will continue on here. We got a lot more bolts and so forth and so on to take out. I'll break them loose first. Okay. I see a nickel down there. Since all this is going to be polished again, I have to be careful not to put too many nicks and gouges in these pieces, otherwise it's going to be that much harder to get them nicely polished. Okay. Yep, don't like that one. Not going to get easily on that one. So these are going to be right angle wrench specials. Not an easy place to get your hand into. All right. I will undo the ones holding the center section and take the center section out of the way. Yeah, it would have been nice if they just gave you a little bit more room to be able to get sockets and things on a lot of these, but I guess that'd take a lot of the fun out of it. I do encounter at times these bolts will have slots cut in them that you can use a screwdriver to use to turn them out once they've been broken loose. Okay. And of course, going back together when things are freshly painted or polished or whatever the case is a completely different story. You have to be so much more careful. There it is. There's just one bolt holding in the center section now. we go. All right. Where's that last bolt? So that means the center section should pop off. Like so. So I'll just give you a little view of it while I have it off. This is where those aluminum balls are. And that is for the coolant that goes through there. There she is. Doesn't seem to be rotten through or cracked or anything anywhere, but we'll check her out. Okay, this arm should come off. And some really good gaskets. Okay. Last section of intake manifold to take off. Loosened up the bolts. See if we can get them all out. See, there's a little bit of corrosion on them. Okay. Okay. And off it is. All right, so now we have the intake manifold completely off and the V is open. And we can move on to the next item, which the next thing I like to do at this point is remove the ignition wiring. So we will continue that in just a moment.